Come on, don't do this to me while I'm on holiday. I'm in Whitby on a little mini break, and I opened my phone yesterday afternoon to the news that the Raspberry Pi Foundation has put its prices up. Again. For the third time since December. At first I thought it was an April Fool's joke, but nope. The joke's on us, because Raspberry Pi just priced itself out of the market. I was so disheartened by the news and the impact it's going to have on our hobby that I decided to put off the video I was going to make this week and get this one out instead, because honestly I couldn't just say nothing. So, go grab a coffee, I'll get one too, and then we'll get into it. Let me tell you about the Raspberry Pi, not the technical specs or which model to buy. I want to talk about what it meant. The Raspberry Pi was the gateway drug. It was how many of us got into home labbing, into tinkering, into running our own servers and building our own smart homes. It was cheap, it was small, it was approachable. You could pick one up for 35 quid, plug it in and then install whatever you fancy, and suddenly you had a project, you had a home lab, you were in the club. I was actually there at the beginning. I knew people who were involved with the very first Pi, and back in December 2012, barely 9 months after it launched, I was invited to a Raspberry Pi hackathon at Munro House in Leeds. That was one of the very first Pi community events in the country, possibly the world. There were over 50 of us crammed into a room, all building stuff with this tiny dirt cheap computer that had crashed 2 websites on launch day because nobody expected that many people to want one. The energy in that room was something else. Everyone was just excited to be tinkering. Many people, myself included, could scarcely believe that a device like this even existed. I didn't have a smart home back then, but I bought one at that event anyway because I just thought it was so damn cool. My project at that event was that I set up a little web hosting server on it. It wasn't anything special and I didn't win, but it was still amazing to me that this tiny device that fit in the palm of my hand could run an entire website. It was miraculous. It was only 35 quid. That's what made the Pi special. Not the ARM chip, not the form factor, as amazing as that was. The price. It was cheap enough that you could experiment without worrying about wasting money. That safety net is what got people through the door. And now that safety net has been pulled away. The Pi 5 with 16 gigs of RAM launched at $120. In the UK, that was about 90 quid, which is reasonable. In fact, genuinely good value. And in December, they put the price up. And in February, they put it up again. And on April 1st, they whacked another $100 on top. And no, it's not an April Fool's joke. I really wish it was. That Pi is now well over $300. In the UK, you're looking close to 300 quid with VAT, 3 bloody price increases in 4 months, over 150% more expensive than when it launched, and a far cry from the cheap tinkerer's device that it was originally intentioned to be. Now look, the Pi Foundation has tried to keep the entry-level options affordable. You can still get a Pi 5 with 1 gig of RAM for about $45. Fair play to them for that, but let's be honest here, those cheaper models are fine for electronics projects, GPIO stuff, learning to code, maybe even some retro gaming. Brilliant for all of that, but for home labbing, for running Home Assistant or a Docker stack or Frigate or any of the things that most of this channel's audience that would actually use a Pi for, 1 gig is just not enough. 4 gigs might be passable, but it's still damn tight and it leaves you no room for scaling. The Pi you actually need for home lab tasks is the one that now costs as much as a proper computer. And that's the bit that really stings for me, because for roughly the same money as a Pi 5 with enough RAM to be useful, you could go on CEX or eBay and pick up a used Lenovo ThinkCentre Tiny or a Dell Optiplex Micro. That's an i5 processor, 8 gigs of RAM, a proper SSD, and all of the bells and whistles included. That Pi 5 I mentioned earlier doesn't even come with a case. If you want an actual usable machine, you need to factor at least another 30 quid into the price. These machines will run circles around the Pi for anything Docker or server related. The Pi's power consumption is still lower and it still has those GPIO pins if you need those, but for the I want to run Home Assistant and a few containers crowd, which is what most people buying a Pi for home labbing actually want, the used mini PC is the better buy now, at the same price. That's where we are. I used to recommend the Pi to everyone who asked me how to get started with home labbing. You've probably seen me do exactly that in several of my videos. I can't do that anymore, and honestly that really bums me out. The Pi was something special, and the Pi Foundation aren't villains here. They're dealing with the same cost pressures everyone else is. Eben Upton himself said prices will come down once the situation stabilises, but right now, the era of the affordable Pi as a gateway into home labbing and smart homes, it's over. The cheap variants that are left can't handle real workloads, and the ones that can just aren't cheap anymore. But this isn't just about the Pi. The Pi is what made me pick up my camera while I'm on holiday, but it's a symptom of something much bigger, and it's kind of affecting everything. The short version is this: the factories that make memory chips, the RAM in your computer, the storage in your phone, the flash memory in your SD cards, those factories have started prioritising AI. The big AI companies are paying enormous amounts of money for specialised memory, and the factories are more than happy to make that instead of the normal stuff you and I use, because why wouldn't they? AI companies pay way more per chip. And it gets worse. The specialised memory that goes into AI hardware is called high bandwidth memory, which sounds like a 70s rock album to me, but it takes up roughly 4 times the manufacturing space per gigabyte compared to normal RAM. So AI isn't just buying more chips. Each AI chip physically takes up more room on the production line. It's a double squeeze. More demand for AI memory, less manufacturing space for everything else. The result is a global shortage of the memory that goes into basically everything. All of it comes from the same manufacturing pipeline, and that pipeline is being consumed by AI data centers. Over 70% of high-end memory chips produced this year are going straight to data centers. One industry CEO has warned that supply could be tight for a decade. Whether that turns out to be right or not, nobody serious is expecting meaningful price relief before 2027 at the absolute earliest, and that's pretty optimistic. And tariffs aren't helping either, but honestly there's a whole separate mess that I'm not going to get into today. So where does this actually show up? Let me give you a couple of examples, starting with one that will make the gamers wince. The NVIDIA RTX 5090 launched at $2,000. That's their flagship graphics card, and yeah, the top end cards have always been pricey. The problem is that memory costs have pushed GPU manufacturing up by 80%, and custom versions of the 5090 are heading towards $5,000. $5,000 for a graphics card. And both Nvidia and AMD have been raising prices and are expected to keep doing it. Now, most of us aren't buying $5,000 graphics cards, but it shows you the scale of what's happening. If Nvidia can't absorb those costs, nobody can. The one that's hitting me personally though is storage. And I mean literally personally right now, today. I have 2 primary cameras that I use for this channel. 2 cameras, 2 SSD cards. That's it. That's a riskily low number of SSD cards for someone who makes videos for a living. But I say for a living, it's getting there. If one of those cards fail, I'm in genuine trouble. I want to buy spares. I've been wanting to buy spares for a while now, but memory card prices have roughly doubled in the last year and a half, and right now I'm kind of having to save up to afford one more card. And then there's my server situation. One of my servers is getting close to full. I need more storage. Another hard drive ideally, but prices have gone up so much that I just can't right now. So instead of buying a drive, I've been going through old files and deleting things up to free space. I hate doing that. Every file I delete is something I made, something I might want again someday, but the alternative is spending money that I don't think is reasonable to spend on a hard drive that would have cost half as much a year ago. So yeah, the content creator who can't afford spare SD cards and the homelabber who's deleting files instead of buying storage. That's me. Both of those are me. And I don't think I'm the only one. So what does all of this actually mean for us, for the home lab and smart home community? Honestly, I think it means the era of just buy more is over. For a while, RAM was cheap, storage was cheap, pies were cheap, and the default approach to basically any problem was to throw hardware at it. Server running slow? Add more RAM. Running out of space? Buy another drive. Want to try something new? Grab a Pi. We all did it. The hobby was built on affordable, abundant hardware, and we got very comfortable with that. But that's not the world we live in anymore. And I think we need to adjust to how we think about this stuff. Not from having home labs to not having home labs, but from always upgrading to actually thinking about what we need before we buy it. Intentional design instead of just accumulating kit because it's cheap, which honestly is probably how we should have been doing it all along. I've got 2 bits of advice and I'm going to start with a confession. My TrueNAS server has a Core i9 processor and 64GB of DDR4 RAM in it. I use it exclusively as a storage NAS. A Core i9 with 64 gigs for serving files. I am Mr. Overkill, I freely admit this. I have an absolute monster of a machine and all it does is store and serve files. It's like hiring a Formula 1 pit crew to change a bicycle tyre. It's far from the only example of overkill in my lab, but that's a story for another day. But you know what? I'm actually really glad I did it, because I built that machine when DDR4 was dirt cheap. I've got a ton of headroom, it handles anything I throw at it without breaking a sweat, and I genuinely couldn't afford to build it again at today's prices. Not even close. So, being Mr. Overkill actually turned out to be the smartest thing I did. But the lesson here right now at today's prices is don't do what I did. Don't buy overkill because you might need it someday. Not at these prices. Actually go and check what you're using first. Open up your server dashboard. Look at your RAM usage. Look at your storage. I guarantee a lot of you have more headroom than you think. If you're looking to buy a new server, ask around other communities for the sort of spec that you'd need. Make sure that you're making it clear that you don't want an overkill machine, you want something that's good enough for what you're running. People will give you great advice for what sort of device that you need that is not overkill. The question isn't, what might I need one day? It's, what do I actually need right now? Because at today's prices, every unnecessary gigabyte of RAM and every empty terabyte of storage is real money that you didn't need to spend. The second bit of practical advice is buy secondhand, and I don't mean that as a consolation prize. I mean it as a genuinely smart move and one I use myself. I buy from CEX and Amazon Warehouse all the time, and I rarely have issues with either. Just last week, I picked up a Mac Mini from CEX and saved 150 quid compared to buying new. In fact, I traded in an old laptop that actually only cost me 13 quid in real money. Same machine, looks brand new, works perfectly, 150 quid still in my pocket. And this ties directly back to what I said about the Pi. If the Pi now costs the same as a used mini PC, just buy the used mini PC. I've already made that case in previous videos and I stand by it now. The Pi's unique selling point was always the price. Without that, the mini PC wins for server stuff. And it's not even close. Used enterprise gear is worth looking at too. Companies decommission servers and workstations constantly, and that hardware ends up on eBay for a fraction of what it costs new. Just be a bit careful with that one and know what you're getting into, because some of these enterprise machines can be very loud and most of them will increase your energy bill, so do some googling and keep your eye on hidden costs. The second-hand market has always been there, but with new prices going up the way they are, it's gone from nice to have to the sensible option for quite a lot of us. Look, I want to be clear about one thing before I wrap up. I'm not anti-AI, I use AI tools myself. This isn't a rant about AI ruining everything. This is about the reality that the demand for AI infrastructure is consuming manufacturing capacity that used to make the stuff we all depend on, and the prices are going up because of it. It's not evil, it's just economics, but it's affecting us, and I think it's worth talking about honestly rather than pretending everything is fine. The Raspberry Pi used to be the thing I tell everyone to buy, the scrappy little board that got people into the hobby. And that era's over now, and I genuinely mourn that, but the hobby itself isn't dead. It just costs more than it used to, and that means we need to be smarter about it. The fun part was never just the hardware anyway. It was the tinkering, the learning, the building something that's yours. That hasn't changed. It's just the hardware that you tinker with costs more now, so be more thoughtful about it. And maybe check your server tonight. You might surprise yourself with how much headroom you've already got. If you've been feeling this too, if you've had that moment where you want to buy something and the price genuinely shocked you, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. What's the most shocking price increase you've seen? Have you changed how you approach your home lab or smart home because of all of this? I really want to know. And if you've noticed the new threads, yeah, Foxy's Lab merch store is now open, link to the description. I'm really chuffed about it, I'm not going to lie. I've got a launch offer on at the moment where you can get 10% off your entire order. I'll put the code around here somewhere. If you want to see more stuff like this, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. You can also come and find me on the Foxy's Lab Discord server where we can have a proper chat about all of this. Link in the description. Right, I've said my piece. I'm going back to my holiday now. I'm going to close this laptop, put my phone away and go get some fish and chips and try very hard not to think about the price of SD cards for a few days. You should totally visit Whitby sometime, by the way. It is lovely, even when you're a bit grumpy about technology prices. Ta-ra!